Yeah.
No, I'm on. I was wondering if Brother Shukri had it for his computer, for the password. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله ومن لا يضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. The believers who come out with faith, alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today we'll continue to look at Surah Al-Fatiha, but within some particular circumstances. But before we start, I wanted to do a little bit of review. Wanted to say this. I would offer to do another class on the Arab-Israeli conflict from a historical perspective, and to understand how all this came about in human terms. Why do I say human terms? Because Islamically, whatever that has happened, we say, mashallah kana, and it's Allah's qadr. And however Allah has allowed it to happen, for whatever reasons He has allowed to happen, we may never know unless He decides to allow us to know, okay? But in human terms, the actions that we understand that brought about certain things, especially from an Islamic standpoint, we as Muslims need to be aware, okay? We need to be aware. And then this gets into, a class like this could go on for the next couple of years with no problem about the information. For example, as a starting point, what happened with there end up being, European Jews migrating to what is Palestine to begin with? Was there a place other than Palestine that they were talking about going to before they settled on going to Palestine? What were the Muslims doing at the time that caused the problem? Okay. And so we know that during the course of the time, in terms of Islamic history, beginning with the Ummah that the Prophet ﷺ put together, and that, yes.
Can I interject for once?
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask you, they were saying, what were the Muslims doing? Were they doing anything?
That's what we'll get to. In terms of that, that's why I said historical looking at it, because the Muslims go from a point of the Mediterranean Sea by the very individuals who hated the Muslims, referring to the Mediterranean as a Muslim lake. That's how extensive the political reach was of the different ummahs that you see at the time. Okay, so if we begin with the Prophet ﷺ himself and establishing Islam in the Arabian Peninsula, okay, there was no Saudi Arabia, no, anything like that at the time, but in the Arabian Peninsula. So there was no Yemen as such, that as we see it today in modern times. Okay, so when he dies, okay, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for whatever reasons He chose, puts the Muslims in a particular situation. Okay, there are two, by the day's terms, we would say, for people to understand, superpowers at the time. You had the Eastern Roman Empire, not the Western Roman Empire. Western Roman Empire ceases to exist in 476 current era. Rome is sacked by the Ostrogoths and the Visigoths. So it ceased. The Western Roman Empire is done. But the Eastern Roman Empire, which is more Greek, the Byzantine Empire, is still there. Okay. And so you look at, it's like, for example, if I had Sister Vicky, okay, and Imam William Tennant, and he had the Western Roman Empire. It's defunct. It's gone. Okay, 476. All that territory they control, what is present Europe, Western Europe, and all that, it's done. It's no longer under control of the Roman Empire. Okay, but Sister Vicky, she's in charge of the Eastern Roman Empire, and its capital is Constantinople. And it's very much alive, okay? And it controls, its extent, it controls all of what is called Asham. And the mistake that people make, they say, oh, Asham, that was Syria. It wasn't just present-day Syria. It was Syria, present-day Lebanon, Palestine, and Jordan. That was Syria, with Damascus as its capital. So you know that the longest inhabited city on the planet is Damascus, of human habitation, is Damascus. So when the prophet, and then I get going, but this is just an example, and I get to what we're going to do today. So when the prophet dies in current era 632, you have the Byzantines over here, and over here you have the Persians, Sassanid Empire, and they've been fighting for the last 150 years. Nobody's really paying attention to what's happening in the Arabian Peninsula. And people say, well, why not? Because as far as they were concerned in terms of economics, there wasn't anything there to be concerned about.
What's the issue?
Huh?
Why are they fighting?
The issue is they're fighting for control, because outside of the Arabian Peninsula, it's a very rich, fertile area. Okay? Some say the cradle of civilization between the Euphrates River and the Tigris. Okay? All right, this is what Babylon was, and the Syrian Empire. Okay? And so the trade routes that go all through here. But the Arabian Peninsula is not looked at as a place where you're going to go and set up commerce at. Even though in the cities, the Meccans, okay, the Meccans are trading. You know, the caravan routes have been there for ages. So what happens is Abu Bakr becomes Khalifa. Okay. The Byzantines were very oppressive. And a delegation of individuals from Syria come to Abu Bakr and they ask, is there anything that the Muslims can do about the way we are suffering under the oppression of the Byzantines? And Abu Bakr says, yes, but there's a condition. If we come, he means militarily, if we come and get rid of the Byzantines, understand that you will be governed under the auspices of Islam. And he explains to them what that is. And they agree. And so then begins the Muslim attempt to take Asham, Syria. The Byzantine emperor's name is Heraclius. And they say that when Syria is taken, Asham is taken, he cries. That was a crown jewel for the Byzantines. Okay. And what Abu Bakr instituted, Abu Bakr dies while the conquest of Asham is taking place. And Umar ibn al-Khattab becomes Khalifa. Okay. And so now, the stories that are wrong. Western historians, some of them would like to say to you that you had all these hundreds of thousands of Arabs that flew out of the Arabian Peninsula and conquered everything. Not true. There's not one battle that the Muslims were involved in that they weren't outnumbered. It's sometimes as much as 4-1. And Allah blessed them to win. Why? Because in human terms, who did he give them? One, they had Khalid bin Walid, who the Prophet named Saiful-Islam, the sword of Allah. They had Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. He's one of the 10 that knew before he died that he would be in paradise. Okay? And overall, as was said to Heraclius when a peace delegation went there, they said, you do not want to fight us because I will bring to you a people who love death more than they love life. Okay? So the first major battle in the conquest of what we call Syria today was Yarmouk Khalid ibn Walid led the Muslim army. They defeated the Byzantines. Okay? And an important thing happens then that shows why looking at the Khalifa Rashidun is so important, the four rightly guided caliphs. There's a city in Syria still existed there called Hims, and the Muslims had taken it. And the Byzantine, a larger Byzantine force came, and the Muslims had to leave. And when they left, they gave the people back the jizya, this tax that non-Muslims pay under Islamic rule. They gave it back. And the people asked, why are you giving the money back? And the Muslim commander said, because it is for our protection. And if we can't protect you, we're not here. We don't deserve the money. So when the Muslims leave, they come back to retake the city. And the Byzantines have a problem because the people inside the city attacked them as well. Saying basically, as non-Muslims, if we have to live under someone's control, it will be the Muslims. Because the Khalifa Rashidun instituted the proper rules of jihad. They didn't destroy their religious institutions. They didn't take any land from them that was cultivated. They didn't bother their women. They didn't bother their businesses. They didn't force their males to be in the army. Instead, you pay the jizya. That's it. But no, you will live under the Sharia. Okay? So they take Syria. The next one is Persia. The battle there that is of importance is called Qadisiyah. And Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas was the commander. And this battle is taught about at West Point. Why? Because Khalid ibn Walid was besieging another city in Syria. Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas during the summer sends a messenger to Khalid and says, I need you here. Khalid packs up his whole army, and in 2 weeks' time, he's in what Qadisiyah is the present day Iraq. Persians are defeated at Qadisiyah, and all of the Persian Empire comes under Muslim control. Okay? I'll stop there. But this is the stuff that we as Muslims need to know. Okay? Because it's the very fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as he says, he gives authority to whoever he wishes. So in terms of Islamic history, you have the Ummah of the Prophet ﷺ and the Khalifa Rashidun. Then you have the Umayyads. After the Umayyads are the Abbasids. Okay. In terms of major terms, then the Seljuk Turks and finally the Ottoman Turks. And for Palestine, this is where the problem comes in. Very quickly, World War I comes. And if I do the class and people want to attend, even if they don't, we can always do it on Zoom. World War I comes. And by this time, the Ottoman Empire is extremely weak. It's lost territory to Russia, to England, to France. And so, Sister Zakia, yes, you are the ruler of the Ottoman Empire at the time. This is 1914. And I and you are the Germans, the Central Powers. You come to the Sultan and say, look, you've lost territory to England, to France, every one of the allies that we are going to fight, you've lost territory to. But you're still a powerful empire. If you side with us and we win, and at that time, Germany had the most powerful army in Western Europe. And they say, if we win, we'll give you back everything that you lost to England and France and Russia. You as a sultan, you already know that Germany beat France in the Franco-Prussian War and took French provinces and incorporated them into Germany. That was in 1871. This is just now like 1914. And so you say, you consult with your ministers and you say, okay, you got a deal. However, as Allah intended, Germany didn't win. Central powers didn't win. And so now, to the victors go the spoils. Treaty of Versailles. The Ottoman Empire split up. Treaty of Versailles, 1917. Two important factors about that. One, America enters into World War I in 1917, and Woodrow, white supremacist Wilson, is the president. Okay. But he can't get involved in the treaty negotiations because the US Senate doesn't ratify the treaty. He ticked off some Republicans, Henry Cabot Lodge to be exact, because he was a Republican. He didn't invite him to go with the delegation to Versailles. And Lodge got upset. And he lobbied and got the Senate, which was Republican dominated, not to ratify the Versailles Treaty, which meant all Wilson could do was observe. So they get there and they decide, one, we're going to make sure that Germany can never cause a war like this again, which failed because 1917, 22 years later, 1939 is World War II. Okay. And they say by this time, the Ottoman Empire is referred to as the old sick man of Europe. We're going to divide up the Ottoman Empire. They had stopped attempting to do that before because they said up until World War I, if we split up the Ottoman Empire, ultimately we're going to fight each other for the choicest parts. But now, why did they do this? It's one of the reasons, primary reasons, is because the level of death and destruction in World War I. The world had never seen a war like World War I. France lost 1.7 million men, England 1.5, Germany 1.3. Russia got kicked out of the war, but even before they got kicked out, they lost over 1 million men. So they said, okay, this is what we're going to do. So they divide up the Ottoman Empire, and this is where the problem starts. France is given Syria. Lebanon is created out of part of Palestine because Lebanon as a country doesn't exist until 1917. In East Jerusalem, 300,000 Palestinians, 350,000 Palestinians go to sleep, recognizing themselves as being Palestinians. They wake up the next morning and they belong to something called Transjordan, controlled by England. In later years, the trans will be dropped off of Jordan. It's simply the Jordan that we know today. The rest of Palestine and Iraq is mandated to Britain. Okay? I'll stop there. So if we want to do this class, I'm more than happy to do because there's things that we need to know. Okay? And so the question would be asked, well, why is America so tied to Israel? Oh, there are several reasons. Several reasons. Okay? And why is it that you have Jews who say, practicing Jews, they'll never set foot in Israel because it's a Zionist state and not a truly Jewish state?
That's what I think. How do they think they have the right to take Palestinian land? How do they think they got the right? They think they got the right.
Well, they think they have the right. And it happens, two things, well, a lot of things happen in 1898, but one of the things that happens in 1898 affecting America is the Spanish-American War. Okay? And out of that, America comes with the empire, especially in the South Pacific. Get control of the Philippines. Practically every island that Japan took up in World War II after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, America had gotten control of from Spain, from beating Spain in the Spanish-American War. Okay. The other thing that happened is that in Europe, you have a guy by the name of Theodor Herzl, an Ashkenazi, a European Jew, and he starts something called the World Zionist Organization. And he comes up with this idea about Jewish nationalism, as they call it. It's called Zionism. But keep in mind, and the next time we're together, I'll cover this. Keep this as very important to realize. The first place that the Jews in the World Zionist Organization chose as a place to settle in, to have a homeland for Jews, was Uganda. That was the first place for consideration. Because who controls Uganda at this time? England does. And England is looking at the fact, do we really want to allow Jewish immigration to Palestine? Let's find somewhere else for them. And Uganda was the place that was chosen. The World Zionist Organization said, no, we don't want that, basically. Okay. And so then they look at it and say, well, wait a minute. We're the chosen people. We will take what was said about us in the Old Testament, the Torah, and say that we want Palestine. Okay? We want Palestine. Winston Churchill has went from being Lord Admiral of the Navy to being Foreign Secretary. He's not really pro-Jewish, but when a person comes to him and asks to allow Jewish immigration into Palestine, it's because you have he's a Russian Jew. His name is Chaim Weizmann. He's born and raised in England, goes to Cambridge, and he's like a chemist. So during World War I, he leads a group of scientists in Britain that produces a gunpowder that increases the range of the British artillery. After the war, he's knighted. He's made a knight, Sir Chaim Weizmann. Okay. And he's asked, what is it that a grateful nation can do? Is there anything more that we can do to show our appreciation for the work that you did in Britain in the war effort? And he says, yes. If you can allow Jews from Eastern Europe to immigrate to Palestine, I don't want anything else, but if you would allow that. And that's when the problem starts. Because World Zionist Organization found something called the Jewish Agency. And the Jewish Agency implants itself in Palestine. It's headed by a guy by the name of David Ben-Gurion. He will be Israel's first prime minister. Golda Meir is there, along with others. Okay. And so the problem begins with this statement. This is what the Zionists say in reference to Palestine. People for a land that is a land without people. Or people who don't have a land for a land that doesn't have people. So they marginalize the Palestinians and everybody else living there right off the bat. Because Sephardic Jews, those born and raised in the Middle East, didn't want to have nothing to do with the Ashkenazi Jews. They looked at them and said, like, what kind of Jews are y'all? Okay? And the Ashkenazi, the European Jews, come in with that aspect of. The other thing that we'll discuss, we need to understand this word Goyim. Goyim. Because Jews around here would tell you, oh, Goyim just means somebody who's not Jewish. Well, when you take that word and you look in the Talmud, this Jewish book of law that was written by the rabbis during the Babylonian captivity, it just doesn't mean non-Muslim. I mean or non-Jew. Because in the Talmud, it talks about how Jews have the ability to treat Goyim. Because in the Talmud it says, Jehovah created non-Jews to be the slaves of Jews. And this is the ignorance that plagues America about this circumstance. In 1456 in France, the French king commissioned a group of individuals to translate the Talmud. And when it was done, he told all the Jews they had to leave France. No way you can stay here with the things that you say about Goyim in the Talmud. So I'll end with this. When I was at the University of Michigan, there was a professor there named Mendenhall, Presbyterian minister, but a professor at the University of Michigan. And so guys coming in wanting to be ministers, especially with Presbyterian, they took classes with him. So we found a copy of the translation of some of the verses in the Talmud. Mendenhall was referred to as a Hebrew Einstein in terms of how well he knew the language. So we took the translation to him and said, "Is this true? The stuff that it says here?" He looked at it and he said, he saw the different verses and chapters. He said, "Yeah." We said, "Literally what this says here is in the Talmud." He said, "Yes." So the first one was, I never forget it, it says that when Jehovah, meaning Allah, has problems in paradise, he consults the rabbis to help solve the problem. Okay? All right? Okay. All right. It also said that two Jews, one is a banker and one isn't. And the one that isn't, he wants a loan. In the Talmud, it says it's forbidden for one Jew to charge another Jew interest on anything. But when it comes to the Goyim, you take them for everything that they have. Okay? The one that really got us was what it said in the Talmud, that if you have a Jew that teaches the Goyim about what is said about them in the Talmud, kill them both. Because if the Goyim find out, they'll kill us outright. So, and this is what you don't hear being talked about. Mm-hmm.
It's the attitude that supposedly being godly people, they're not trying to call anyone to God.
Right. At all.
Because it's all secretive.
No.
So you can't I'm gonna go to It's like it is only us. So there's no representation of all the prophets.
No, none.
So you're not right.
Right.
You're already not right.
You don't invite nobody.
But don't anybody see it like that?
Yeah.
They don't say, "Come on out, come to our synagogue and
not
we're
at
gonna
all.
teach you." They don't do dawah.
Nope.
So actually, you're not trying to improve the world because they try to keep everything amongst them own self.
Right.
You are Gentile.
Yeah.
Which means you're not nobody. We can do anything to you.
Right. And that's, so, you look at that circumstance. So when you hear several years ago, there was a Jewish rabbi in Brooklyn. His name was Schneerson, maybe 8, 9, 10 years ago. And some Jews, because Hasidic Jews, Orthodox Jews, they're in houses. They have the Sitmars, the Leibavutchers. He was Leibavutcher. But some of them across the houses said that they referred to Schneerson as the Messiah. He never claimed himself. But he did say this. He said, "As long as I live, I will never set foot in Israel as long as it's a Zionist state. Never will." And he didn't. He didn't. Okay? He didn't. And the people in his house, the Leibavutchers, he told them the same thing. That state, Israel, as it exists, is an abomination. That the Messiah won't return as long as Israel exists. as a Zionist state. You know, so we just need to be aware. So when they start to talk about how these things came around, you know, people are looking at the bombing and saying, "Oh, it's atrocious." It is, okay, but historically, this is what they've always done.
Yeah.
So in 1947, when the quote-unquote state of Israel existed, there's fighting that had been going on before that. The Palestinians finally got wind of understood what was happening, and they started to resist. As far as Britain was concerned, coming out of World War II, they wanted to try to go back to having exactly what they had before. So they were stomping on the Palestinians and the Jews. So the Zionists, the European Jews, said, remember when Malcolm X gave a talk and he was talking about achieving the betterment for our people? And he said, by any means necessary. Okay. There's a Jewish individual by the name, and I want to expect you to remember his name, but I'll go over it again, named Vladimir Jabotinsky. He comes to Palestine and he forms this organization called Irgun, IRGUN, and immediately the British classified as a terrorist organization. Why? Because he begins to use his organization to attack British soldiers and administrative officials, but they also attack Palestinians. Another guy shows up, he ends up becoming prime minister of Israel at one time. Yitzhak Shamir forms another group called the Stern Gang. Again, the British classify them as terrorists. Early 1948, and you can look this up on your computer, these two organizations attack a Palestinian village that's in the Jewish sector, but there's never been a problem there. It wasn't a problem until European Jews came, Ashkenazis. The Sephardic Jews and Muslims and Palestinian Christians had lived together for hundreds of years with no problems whatsoever. They visited each other when they were sick. They went to each other's funerals, weddings, you name it. No problems. And then these individuals from Europe show up. So the village, Deir Yassin, Deiryasin. These two groups hit Deir Yassin. Forget the exact date, but I know the time, about 2:30 in the morning. And you can go to the UN to this very day because the Red Cross got to Deir Yassin as quote unquote, these two groups were winding up the operation against Deir Yassin. They attacked Deir Yassin while all the fighting age men were gone, harvesting crops. So all that was in the village were elderly men, women, and children. Okay? They attacked. A group of Red Cross nurses from Norway and doctors got to Deir Yassin while the massacre was still going on. And these two Norwegian nurses talked about the fact that they saw two female fighters from Irgun and the Sturgay take 7 Palestinian women who were pregnant, rip their stomachs open, take out the embryos, and smash their heads against the wall. That record, that testimony is still in the UN. The next day, on big loudspeakers on cars, the Jews, the Ashkenazis, are driving through West Bank and other areas saying to the Palestinians, if you don't want to have happen to you that happened at Deir Yassin, you should leave. So by the time 1952 comes, over 1 million Palestinians have left. Same process, time and time again. So when the Oklahoma City Federal Building is blown up, y'all remember that? Yeah. Okay. The people who blew up the building copied the plans and process that the Stern Gang and Irgun used to blow up the King David Hotel in Jerusalem in 1952.
When that Timothy McVeigh, they
But they copied.
Yeah.
They copied the process that these two Jewish groups used. Okay. And so at that point, Palestinians leave. Nobody's protecting them or fighting for them. But the process continues. So what you had then was ethnic cleansing, and what you have now is ethnic cleansing. Period. So I'll come out from my house for a year or whatever to do a class on the Arab Israeli conflict, so we know and understand. When you hear this stuff coming out, out of these TV stations, other than NPR, that you understand what's being said and what's and why it's being said. Okay, and that the certain things aren't going to be said. They're not going to be said at all. Nobody's going to say, give you a true explanation or a factual explanation why. Yes.
Yes, I wanted to say, even without knowing the history and what they are saying, they bombed us and they killing us and they did all these Jews. When we went to Hajj, we went to Jerusalem.
Right.
So our side trip there, we went to the palace.
Right.
We had to be checked.
Yep.
Everything just to get in.
Yep.
So when we got in, because I don't know, I'm from here, I'm just,
Right.
So we going around and I'm like thinking these are ruins, like we're going through ruins. It came time for the kids to come home from school. And we see kids going into houses that look like wasn't a house. It was
Bomb, yeah.
It wasn't nothing.
Right.
So I'm thinking, how are they saying that these people who don't have nothing are a threat to you?
Right.
Because they might have some old fashion, some kind of thing to go over to wherever you at, but
right.
You got everything.
Yep.
So it's just like us having a riot.
Right.
And we got the police coming in. We throwing rocks and stones and
right.
And then they come in and
right.
Right.
No. Not at all. We watched while we were in Saudi Arabia, was one weekend we watched a documentary put on by Al Jazeera, and what it was, they had two groups of individuals, Palestinians who weren't on the West, that didn't live, and they had been there and left, and so there's no right to return to come back. Okay, and Jews from Morocco that had went to Israel to live. And so this one Jewish family said, this lady said, well, I just can't understand why the other Arab countries don't take them in. And so one of the Palestinian women said, she said, because I'm not Saudi Arabian, I'm not Jordanian, I'm Palestinian. Okay, what you have, you took my home. Okay, and the lady said, no, you didn't. And this lady said, oh, yes, you did. She said, because the house that you're living in was a house that my husband and I built. We were forced to leave and they gave it to you. Jewish woman she didn't have anything else to say then. She said, no, she said, literally, the house that you're living in is a house that my husband and I built and we raised 3 kids in, and then we were forced out. You didn't do anything. One of the Jewish rabbis who won't go to Israel, his life has been threatened, not by Palestinians, by Zionists. He said this, he said, people need to understand something. He said, when the Catholics kicked us out of Spain, 15th century, when they kicked us out of Spain, he said, where did we go? So we went across the Straits of Gibraltar and we went to the Muslims, North Africa, Egypt. He said, and all they did was took us in, treated us kindly, and we lived and prospered. He said so, and before that, we had lived with the Palestinians for hundreds of years. So one of the things that they're not going to tell you is this. They always want to talk about Iran. The largest community of Jews living outside of Israel lives in Iran. Yeah. And they've been asked, why don't you leave Iran to go live in Israel? And they are for what? So this is our home. Because what they don't, they always talk about Khomeini was this and Khomeini was that. Well, one of the things that Khomeini did when he came to power in Iran, he passed a law. He wrote it out and said, Jews and Christians living in Iran are Ahlul Kitab. They're people of the book. And Allah says in the Qur'an that if they live under us and respect us and our ways, they have to be protected.
Yeah.
So they were interviewing this rabbi, and he said, the new synagogue that is in Tehran, Ayatollah Khomeini gave us the money to do that. And he said, and for all the years that we've been here, we've never had a problem. So why won't we go to Israel? For what? No reason to go. They haven't done anything to us here that says that we have to leave or that we should leave. That you won't hear. So we just have to be aware. Allah does what He wants as He wants. But let's not be bamboozled about what we be seeing. I don't even watch the news about what's going on because you're not going to get the straight talk. You're not going to get anything from it.
I watched
From South Africa.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah. Right.
United States.
None.
And the way he talked was the same, almost the same talk that he was talking about Nelson Mandela.
Right.
All the ones that had been underneath of their
Right.
and I mean he really laid it down.
Right. There's a quote from Mandela that he basically says that couldn't feel satisfied with having achieved freedom in South Africa when he looked and saw what was happening to the Palestinians.
Yes.
That was his view, period. It's flat out apartheid. I mean, there was one case in the West Bank, and they were talking to this doctor, and he was saying, he was a Palestinian doctor. He says, look, if a Palestinian comes to us and, the child needs to be in an incubator, he said, we only have 3. He said, 5 miles away, there's a Jewish hospital, they have 6. But we can't take a Palestinian child there to use that incubator. Not gonna happen. Okay. In that circumstance. And then the other thing is, there's been any number of circumstances where different American presidents have used their quote unquote influence to stomp on the Palestinians, so to speak. The Palestinians were in Jordan, and unfortunately they did pose a threat to King Hussein at the time, and he put them out, but they went to Lebanon. 1975, Lebanese civil war starts, and the Palestinians are there, and they immediately side with the Muslims. Okay, well, the first crusade ends with the Crusaders in control of Palestine, and they establish something called the Kingdom of Jerusalem, and they keep it until Salahuddin ibn Ayyubi, 100 years later, takes it back. Okay, so the Catholic Church gets established there, but the Lebanese who become Catholic over time are referred to as Maronite Christians. They're Catholic, but they put a significance of emphasis of worship on Mary. Okay, and they hate the Palestinians, don't want them there. So, 1973 war, Egypt, Iraq, and Syria surprised Israel. The Egyptian 3rd and 5th armies break through the Bar-Lev line in Sinai. They stop, and Golda Meir as prime minister, she contacts Henry Kissinger and says, look, if you don't help us, Israel may cease to exist. Okay? America doesn't send troops, but America uses the spy satellites because the Pentagon, they're observing, real time. Even at this time, they can observe real time what's happening. And so as these spy satellites go around certain areas, they take pictures and they come back almost immediately. So when they go across the Sinai, they see that between the Egyptian 3rd and 5th armies, there's a gap. But you had to be that high up enough to see it. They send this information to the Israeli Defense Forces. A guy by the name of Ariel Sharon, he leads an attack that cuts off the Jewish 5th Army from the 3rd. Ultimately, it ends up in a ceasefire. And right after that is the Camp David Peace Accords. And I don't know if y'all remember, there's Jimmy Carter, Anwar Sadat, and Menachem Begin, who at one time been considered a terrorist by the British. They're shaking at Camp David and Arafat and Menachem Begin, who had been a terrorist too, shaking hands, and Carter has his hands on the top. But they weren't telling anybody. As soon as Sadat signed that document at Camp David, Menachem Begin sent secret transmission back to the Israeli armed forces. The invasion of Lebanon is a go. They invade Lebanon, bomb Beirut, bomb Tyre. And so what happens is Israel says, we're invading Lebanon because they're allowing the PLO and the Yasser Arafat to operate from here. So the ceasefire is that Yasser Arafat and his fighters have to leave Lebanon, but they can take their weapons. So they do. But the question becomes, what about the women and children and elderly who are left there? They're in primarily two refugee camps, Sabra and Shatila. The deal that's cut is, because of the Maronite Christians, their military wing is called the Phalangists. They're extremely brutal. And so Arafat says, look, if we're going to leave and not be able to take, and we can't get our women and children until a month later, who's going to protect them? Begin says, oh, we will. Okay. And so one particular night, for some reason, the Israeli soldiers that are supposed to be there to protect Sabra and Shatila aren't there. The Phalangists from the Maronite Christians go in and kill 500 Palestinian men, women, and elderly men, women, and children. When Menachem Begin, the prime minister, is asked about it, this goes back to the point about what says in the Talmud about the Goyim. When he's asked about it, he looks at the reporters and says, look, why are y'all getting upset with us over a few Goyim being killed? Exact quote. That's what he said. Basically saying, we killed some subhumans, so what are y'all upset about? And then you get a guy like Pat Robertson, from the 700 Club,
Oh,
he was asked, he said, I never will forget this program. He said, like, anybody who attacks Israel is going to be a lodestone, a weight around their necks. And they asked him why. He said, because, Israel has to be there. So the governor said, why does Israel have to be there? He said, well, in our end of time scenario, if Israel's not there, the Messiah, Jesus, doesn't come back. And so the guy said, he said, so that's why you support Israel? Because of your beliefs? So he asked Pat Robertson a question. He said, so tell me this, can Jews go to heaven? Pat Robertson said, absolutely not. if they don't accept Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior, no, they can't go. But the guy said, but you collect money, millions of dollars every year and send to them simply because of your religious belief that if Israel doesn't exist? He said, so basically you said if Israel doesn't exist and the Messiah doesn't come back, your religious belief about the end of time is a lie. So nobody gets, there's few countries that gets more foreign aid from the US government than Israel. But that's supplemented by another $15 to $20 million that evangelical Christians, black and white, send to them. For that reason, that if Israel is not there, and then you have the other Jews saying, yeah, well, the Messiah not going to come if there is a Zionist state. And no, Zionism and Judaism aren't the same thing, period.
Yeah, I just found that out. They're not the same.
Not the same. No,
So,
yeah, go right.
I mean, they're different.
They're entirely different.
Entirely different.
Zionists use aspects from the Torah and Judaism when they need to. When they need to. I watched the 2020 program with Tom Geraldson, and he was in Tel Aviv, and he's interviewing this Jewish woman, young woman. She's an architect, and she's talking about these people that she hates. So Tom Geraldson's like, well, okay, I'm in Tel Aviv, Israel. She has to be talking about the Palestinians. And so he said, you really dislike the Palestinians? And she said, I don't have a problem with the Palestinians. She said, it's these ultra-Orthodox Jews that I have a problem with. She said, I hate them. Okay, so the other thing you won't hear is those Jews who say, if there was a two-state solution, peace between the Palestinians and Israel, there'd be a civil war inside of Israel between non-practicing and practicing Jews.
Right. But there was a problem in recently.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
There's a problem going on now.
Yeah. So that's the other stuff you won't hear. Okay. But on the other hand, we need to be aware that when we look at this history and the lessons we draw from it, as long as Muslims, Allah didn't ask our ancestors to be perfect, just to sincerely strive to please Him and worship Him. As long as that was happening, it wasn't one problem that came before them in terms of an outside force that Allah didn't bless them to deal with. Seriously. You can look exceedingly at practically every circumstance and see the Muslims stopped doing what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enjoined upon them to do as Muslims. Had problems. Big problems. For real. And that's to say, as much as my heart goes out to the Palestinians, did they do some stuff that's not cool? Yes, they did. You can't have Yasser Arafat. He's head of PLO. PLO just wasn't a Muslim organization. There were Marxists and so forth. But he's in Jerusalem, allowed to visit. Okay. And it was on 60 Minutes. He's standing there and he's making dua. But it's who he's making dua to. That's the problem. He's not calling upon Allah. He's praying to Isa ibn Maryam. Oh, give us aid and sustenance. Protect us. Grant us victory. Yes, indeed.
That's why he got killed.
Yes. And the thing about it was, the commentator asked him, he said, the commentator said, you just committed shirk. That's what the commentator said. And the guy who was talking to him said, what do you mean? He said, what he just did is the one sin for Muslims that they believe that Allah will not forgive. And the guy was like, what? He said, absolutely. He said, I'm telling you. Okay? Problems. Some Palestinian groups have gave up on Islam. They look at Islam and said, oh, the reason we're in this problem is because of Islam. They blame Islam. How? So anyway, I took all the time. I'm sorry.
You can see that it's on everybody's
Yeah.
mind. And you can see where the news was telling Harold that the news people, they have to be very careful what they say.
They sure do.
Reason why is because they're losing their jobs.
Yep.
If they say anything,
Yep.
and especially the young people that are in college.
Yeah.
And they just NYU to just getting to get her law degree and going into law firm.
Right.
And she came against it.
Yeah.
And she lost her job.
Same thing happened at Harvard too.
Yeah, Harvard.
It sure did.
Yeah.
Okay, it sure did. They said like, one thing it said was, why would you want a lawyer to represent you?
Yes.
Okay, that sides with the Palestinians.
Yeah.
Okay, so some you got college professors lost their jobs.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, lost their jobs. Yep, lost their jobs. So that that whole circumstance, is that like so. I look at NPR online, but when they but the TV news, nah, not even. Not even. That and that right, exactly.
Yes.
Control all that, and then you can make the people a jump.
Yeah.
Because all of us, not me to see it like that, but the people want the wealth,
Right.
they want the money, they
Yeah.
want all that, so you can control.
Yeah. And what's so crazy about it is this being in the forefront. I'm not saying us knowing about what happens to our Palestinian brothers and sisters is not important for us to know, but it overshadows other things, like the civil war in Sudan. My goodness, thousands of people have died there.
Yes.
Okay, in Central Africa, don't hear anything. Okay, not anything. And I watched one thing on NPR where this historian said, we constantly talk about the 6 million Jews, quote unquote, that died in the Holocaust. He said, but nobody wants to talk about the 10 million Africans that King Leopold killed in the Congo. Literally, 10 million, while Belgium was in charge of the Congo, 10 million Africans died. Documented. Documented. There's a book called King Leopold's Ghost. I use it in the classes that I taught, and that's what it's about. Those 10 million people that died in the Belgian Congo when it was called the Belgian Congo. And the kicker is Samuel Jackson played in a Tarzan movie. Okay. But the underlying thing was he was in the Belgian Congo to get information to take back to The Hague because they put King Leopold on trial. Yeah. 10 million Africans. They cut off hands, ears cut out tongue, all kind of nonsense. And this historian's point was, and yet we hear nothing.
I never heard of it.
Yep. 10 million. Yeah. You know, so, but next week I'll go back to the Tufts. What I want to do, one of the Tafseers that I use, that's if you get Ibn Kathir, no matter where you get it from, it's the same. Okay. But some of them are easier to navigate. So this one I have is from archive.org. 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 And it gives you from Fatiha all the way through. And it allows you the page, you can flip the pages, you can, you can, zoom, make the print larger, and it's really easy to use. Tafsir Ibn Kathir English at archive.org.
Was that conflict before the first part?
Which that?
Before Al-Qur'an.org.
Tafsir Ibn Kathir. Right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, put Tafsir Ibn Kathir, archive.org. Thank you all for coming out. I know it wasn't Tafsir, but we're going to look at, next time, the aspect about Bismillah. Okay? Bismillah. Okay?
I can't get my internet these days.
It's because the question becomes, is it an ayat of itself? Or is it part of the first ayat of Surah Al-Fatiha? Okay, this is the discussion that Ibn Kathir addresses and takes a look at it. And we'll look at the aspect of Alhamd. Okay, what is it that Allah tells us about when we say Alhamdulillah? What is it? What is the reference to that?
My servant is praising.
Okay. And we'll look at that. For example, very quickly says, and I'll read it, but wherever you get Ibn Kathir from, it's going to be the same in terms of that. Okay. So it says, in the name of Allah, the most gracious and most merciful, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Companions started the book of Allah with Bismillah. Scholars also agree that Bismillah is a part of an ayat in Surah An-Nam, chapter 27. They disagree on whether it is a separate ayah before every surah, or is it an ayah or a part of an ayah included in every surah, where Bismillah appears in its beginning. Al-Daraqutni, one of the Mufassirin, says, also recorded a hadith from Abu Hurairah, from the Prophet ﷺ, in this hadith by Ibn Khuzaymah, compiled by Ibn Khuzaymah. Also, similar statements were attributed to Ali, Ibn Abbas, and others. The opinion that Bismillah is an ayah of every surah, except Al-Bara'ah, chapter 9, was attributed to the companions Ibn Abbas, Ibn Umar, Ibn Az-Zubair, Abu Hurairah, and Ali. This opinion was also attributed to the Tabi'in, Atta, Tawas, Sayyid ibn Jubair, Nakhul, and Al-Zuhri. This is also the view of Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak, Al-Shafi'i, Ahmad ibn Hanbal, Ishaq bin Raweha, and Abu Ubaid al-Qasim bin Salam. On the other hand, Imam Malik, Abu Hanifa, and their followers said that the Bismillah is not an ayat in Al-Fatiha or any other surah. Bismillah allowed in the prayer. As for Bismillah allowed during the prayer, those who did not agree that it is, those who did not agree that it is a part of our Fatiha state that the Bismillah should not be allowed. The scholars who stated the Bismillah is part of every surah except chapter 9 had different opinions. Some of them, such as Ash-Shafi, said one should recite Bismillah but Al-Fatiha allowed. This is also the opinion of many among the companions. The Tabaeen and the Imams of Muslims from the Salaf and the later generations, for instance, this is the opinion of Abu Hurairah, Ibn Umar, Ibn Abbas, Muawiyah, Umar, and Ali. This list right here is important because the one name in there, Muawiyah, is really important because this is the Muawiyah that fought Ali at the Battle of Siffin. Okay? And Ali's forces divide into two parts because Muawiyah is losing. His forces are losing. And so his generals, who are all Sahaba, say to him, look, we should sue for arbitration because of the ayat in the Qur'an, in paraphrasing, says, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that if you are fighting and the individuals you're fighting want to sue for peace, it's better to sue for peace than to continue the fighting. And in this particular instance, it was definitely important because the greatest circumstance that was happening, you had Muslims killing Muslims. Okay? So you notice when this war between Ali and Muawiyah take place, there's certain of the noted Sahaba who are not there, like Bilal ibn Rabah. When they see this fitna happening, they leave. They said, we're not going to be involved in this. Okay? So, but it didn't still stop Muawiyah in a sound train of transmission to have hadith accepted from him, because he was still a Sahaba. Okay? He became the 5th Khalifa. Said, according to Ibn Abdul Bar and Al-Bayhaqi, also the 4 Khalifas, meaning Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali. It's a Khatib reported was said to have held this view, although the report from them is contradicted. The Tabaeen, scholars who gave the Tafseer, include Sa'id ibn Jubair, and it's a long list of them. Ikrama, Al-Qabla, Al-Zuhri, Ali bin Al-Hasan, his son Muhammad, Sayyid bin al-Musayyib, Atta, Tawas, Mujahid, Salim, Muhammad bin Ka'b al-Quraysi, Abu Bakr bin Muhammad, Abu Wa'il ibn Sirin, Muhammad bin al-Muqtar, Ali bin Abdullah bin Abbas, his son Muhammad, Nafi, the freed, and notice here in the Tabaeen, Nafi, the freed slave of Ibn Umar, who someone said that there was going to be a 5th Khalifa Rashidun, Abdulaziz ibn Umar would have been it. He would have been the person. Okay. Umar bin Abdulaziz, Azra bin Qais, Habib bin Abu Thabit, Abu Asha, and others. Okay. And so, but finally, what it comes down to be said is, I'll finish this part where it says that the proof of these scholars relied on is that since Bismillah is a part of Al-Fatiha, it should be recited aloud like the rest of Al-Fatiha. Also, An-Nisa recorded in his Sunan, Ibn Hibban and Ibn Khuzaymah in their Sahihs, and Al-Hakim and the Mustadrak, that Abu Hurairah once performed the prayer and recited Bismillah aloud. After he finished the prayer, he said, among you I performed the prayer that is the closest to the prayer of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Furthermore, in Sahih Bukhari, it is recorded that Anas bin Malik was asked about the recitation of the Prophet. He said his recitation was unhurried. He then demonstrated that and recited while lengthening the recitation of Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Also the Musnad ibn Ahmed, the Sunan of Abu Dawood, the Sahih of Ibn Hibban, and Mustadid of Al-Hakim. It is recorded that Salama, the Prophet's wife, said, the Messenger of Allah used to distinguish each ayah during his recitation. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. And she said that in the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, all praise and thanks be to Allah, the Lord of us all that exists, the most gracious, the most merciful, the owner of the day of recompense. And they said that this hadith was sahih. So furthermore, Imam Abu Abdullah al-Shafi and Al-Hakim recorded that Muawiyah led the prayer in Al-Madinah. Pay close attention to this. Al-Muawiyah led the prayer in Medina. He did not recite Bismillah. The Muhajirin, Sahaba, the Muhajirin that were there, who were present at that prayer, criticized that. When Muawiyah led the following prayer, he recited Bismillah aloud. The hadith mentioned above provided sufficient proof for the opinion that the Bismillah is recited aloud. As for opposing evidences that the scientific analysis of the narrations mentioned, their weaknesses or otherwise, it is not our desire to discuss that subject at this time. This is Ibn Kathir's words, okay? Other scholars stated that the Bismillah should not be recited aloud in the prayer, and this is the established practice of the four Khalifas, as well as Abdullah bin Mughaffil and several scholars among the Tabi'in in later generations. It is also the madhab view of Abu Hanifa, Al-Thawri, and Ahmed ibn Hanbal. Imam Malik stated that the Bismillah is not recited aloud or silently. Now that's so what is it? So it says this group based their view upon that, on what Imam Muslim recorded that Aisha radiallahu anha said that the Messenger of Allah used to start the prayer by reciting Takbir, Allahu Akbar, and then recite Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, all praise and thanks to Allah, the Lord of that exists. This is Ibn Abi Hatim. Also the two Sahihs, meaning Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, that Anas bin Malik said, I prayed behind the Prophet, Abu Bakr, Umar, and Uthman, and they used to start their prayer with Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. He said, all praise and thanks be to Allah, the Lord of all that exists. Muslim added, and they did not mention Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of Allah, the most gracious and most merciful, whether in the beginning or the end of the recitation. Similar is recorded in the Sunan books from Abdullah bin Mughaffil, may Allah be pleased with him. These are the opinions held by respected Imams in their statements, and similar, that they agree that the prayer of those who recite Al-Fatiha aloud or in secret is correct. All favor is from Allah. So the point being, if a person says Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim aloud, leading the Salah, no problem. And if they don't, no problem. No problem.
You know, because I often wonder why some people say it out loud, and then some people don't say it at all.
Right.
They go into
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm saying that because one of the things that we have to do as best we can is remove unnecessary fitna. There's enough to have to deal with than having some consternation over something like this, when either way is fine. Okay. So if a person says, reciting Salat, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, okay, say like in Maghrib, fine. And if someone leaves it and doesn't, it's fine. Okay, in terms of that. Cool. So I carried on for a little bit too long. But, inshallah, we'll come back and continue for that. So if you get it downloaded, just go to the pages are all the same in him. So you're going to go to page 31, and the topic will be the virtue of Al-Fatiha. Okay, and we'll continue from there. And let me give one other thing here, because it's in this book to talk about it now, because it's really important. One of the great blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us, that is constantly there, is that of the things that we do that are halal, is only concerned with those things that are halal. The difference from it just being an act and being ibadah, worship, is whether or not we say Bismillah in front of what it is that we're doing. Okay? This is not judging anybody's intention at all. But if, I'm helping Brother Mikhail, we got boxes to carry. Okay? And just to myself, Bismillah. If the intention is pure, through Allah's grace and mercy, that goes from just being me picking up the box and carrying it to being an act of ibadah, for worship. No other way of life has been given that. No other way of life has been given that. Huh?
Why not say?
Exactly. Exactly. And that's what, when you'll see on page 32 of the Tafseer, that's one of the things that Ibn Kathir approaches. It's called Bismillah is recommended before performing any deed. Mm-hmm. And that's why. Okay? So, سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. I had